Rain didn't just fall in the city, it drowned everything. It turned the world into a watercolor painting left out in a storm. But outside the towering Hawthorne Plaza, the storm wasn't just coming from the sky. It was erupting on the sidewalk. Bella stood frozen, clutching her mop bucket against her chest, her cleaning uniform soaked within seconds. She watched in shock as Miles Hawthorne, the city's most elusive billionaire, stood by the open door of his limousine, screaming at his driver. "Get out!" Miles roared, his voice cutting through the thunder. "You leaked the location. You're done." The driver, a burly man, threw the keys onto the wet asphalt, cursed, and stormed off into the night. Miles stood there, chest heaving, rain darkening his tuxedo. He looked wild, desperate. Then he turned and saw her. The only witness, the invisible cleaning girl who had just finished scrubbing the lobby floors. He looked at the keys on the ground, then at her. "You," he barked, pointing a trembling finger. "Do you have a license?" Bella blinked, water dripping from her eyelashes. Yes, sir. But I'm just the—" "I don't care who you are," he cut her off, stooping to snatch the keys from a puddle. He shoved them into her free hand. "Can you drive this car without selling me out to the press? Yes or no?" Bella looked at the keys. She thought of her overdue rent. She thought of the empty fridge in her apartment. "Yes," she whispered. "Then drive," Miles commanded. He tossed the chauffeur's cap, abandoned by the previous driver, at her. Bella caught it. It was damp and slightly too big. She put her bucket down, shoved her hair under the cap, and climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was still warm from the previous driver. She felt like an imposter. She felt terrified, but she turned the ignition. The back door closed with a precise click. The silence inside was louder than the thunder. "Home, sir?" she asked, her voice shaking as she adjusted the mirror. She caught his reflection. His eyes were closed. He looked like a man holding onto his sanity by a thread. "Home," he replied. His voice was a low baritone, rough like gravel. "And lock the doors. Don't let anyone near me." The car glided forward. Bella gripped the wheel until her knuckles turned white. She wasn't supposed to be here. 10 minutes ago, she was worrying about buying detergent. Now, she was navigating a beast of steel through a deluge, carrying the weight of an empire in the back seat. In the rearview mirror, Miles opened his eyes. They were blue, icy, piercing blue. He studied her, the ill-fitting cap, the stray lock of chestnut hair, the terrified hazel eyes. "You're not security," he noted, his voice devoid of emotion. "No, Mr. Hawthorne," she replied. "I'm from the cleaning crew. Night shift." He let out a short, humorless laugh. It was a dry sound. "Cleaning crew," he repeated. "Well, tonight you're the only person on my payroll I haven't fired." He shifted, looking out at the rain. "Do you know why you're driving me?" "No, sir." "Because everyone else has a price," he murmured. "Let's hope yours is high enough to keep your mouth shut." Bella swallowed hard. "I'm just here to drive, sir." As they approached the massive gates of the Hawthorne estate, the mansion loomed like a fortress. It was beautiful, cold, and impenetrable. Bella stopped the car. "One warning," Miles said softly. She looked at the mirror. He was leaning forward, the mask of the billionaire gone, replaced by a desperate father. "Whatever you see inside this house," he whispered, "whatever you hear, you bury it along with the dust you sweep. Do you understand?" Bella nodded. "I understand." She watched him walk up the steps, a lonely figure swallowed by his own wealth. She should have run. She should have taken her pay and never returned. But as she watched the heavy doors close, she felt a pull. She wasn't just a cleaner anymore. She had been invited into the beast's lair, and she had no idea that she was the only one who could tame him. 2 weeks turned into a fragile, intoxicating routine. The rain over the city seemed to have ceased, replaced by a humid, heavy mist that clung to the windows of the limousine, but inside the car, the storm was just beginning. Bella was no longer just a substitute. She had become a fixture in Miles Hawthorne's nocturnal world. Every evening at 7 sharp, she waited by the curb of the towering glass monolith where he conducted his empire. Every evening, he slid into the back seat, smelling of exhaustion and expensive scotch, loosening his tie as the door clicked shut. They rarely spoke. Words were dangerous things, clumsy and sharp, capable of cutting through the delicate veil of professionalism that separated them. Instead, they communicated through the glass. The rearview mirror became their confessional. It was a rectangular frame of intimacy where social standing dissolved into raw human need. Bella would catch him watching her, not with the casual glance of a passenger checking the traffic, but with a searing, intense focus that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He watched the way her hands gripped the steering wheel. He watched the way she bit her lower lip when the traffic snarled. And she watched him. She saw the way his mask crumbled the moment they were alone. She saw the profound loneliness etched into the lines around his eyes, a grief so ancient it seemed to be carved from stone. He wasn't the titan of industry in those moments. He was just a man sitting in the dark, wishing he were anywhere else. The air between them grew thinner, hotter with every silent drive. One Tuesday, the routine finally broke. The silence was no longer enough. "Stop the car," Miles said suddenly. They were on a quiet stretch of road overlooking the harbor, miles away from the estate. Bella pulled over smoothly, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. Her heart began to race. Had she made a mistake? Was this the moment he fired her for looking too long, for dreaming too big? "Turn off the engine," he commanded. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired. She obeyed. The hum of the engine died, leaving them in a profound, ringing silence amplified by the distant foghorns of the bay. "Talk to me," he said. He didn't lean forward this time. He stayed in the shadows of the back seat, his face obscured. "About what, sir?" Bella asked, her voice trembling. "Anything. Just make noise. Tell me something real. Everyone I talk to lies. They tell me what the market is doing, what the shareholders want, what the lawyers advise. No one tells me anything real." Bella hesitated. She looked at his silhouette in the mirror. She saw a desperation there that terrified her. "I like the rain," she said softly, the words tumbling out before she could check them. "Most people hate it because it ruins their plans. I like it because it washes things clean. It makes the world look soft, forgiving." Miles remained silent for a long time. "Forgiving," he repeated, the word rolling off his tongue like a foreign prayer. "I don't think I remember what that feels like." "It's not about forgetting, sir," she whispered, daring to meet his eyes in the reflection. "It's about surviving the flood." The connection between them snapped into place, tight and undeniable. It was a breach of protocol, so severe it felt like a physical touch. A chauffeur did not offer philosophy to a billionaire. A billionaire did not ask his driver for emotional salvage. But the lines were blurring. The wall was cracking. The true shift, however, didn't happen in the car. It happened 3 nights later, inside the fortress. Bella had been asked to wait in the main foyer while Miles finished a call before they departed for a charity gala. The house was cavernous, filled with shadows and the oppressive weight of history. While she waited, standing stiffly in her uniform, she heard a sound, a soft, rhythmic thumping coming from the grand staircase. She turned and saw him. It was the boy, Leo. He was 4 years old, a miniature version of Miles, with the same dirty blonde hair and the same haunting, intelligent eyes. He was sitting on the 3rd step, clutching a worn, velvet rabbit by its ear. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just stared at the marble floor, lost in a world where sound didn't exist. Bella knew she should look away. She was staff. She was invisible. But her heart broke for him. She took a step closer, breaking the invisible barrier of her station. She didn't speak to him like an adult. She didn't ask him how he was. Instead, She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple, shiny quarter. She knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level, ignoring the stiffness of her uniform. With a fluid motion of her hand, she made the coin vanish, then pulled it from behind the velvet rabbit's ear. Leo blinked. His eyes widened. She did it again. Vanish. Reappear. For the first time in 6 months, a tiny, ghost-like smile touched the boy's lips. He reached out a small hand to touch the coin. "It's magic," Bella whispered, her voice a conspiracy just for him. "But you have to keep the secret." She didn't hear the footsteps on the landing above. She didn't see the shadow falling over them until it was too late. "What are you doing?" The voice was ice cold. Bella froze. The coin slipped from her fingers and clattered loudly onto the marble floor, the sound echoing like an accusation. She looked up to see Miles standing at the top of the stairs. He was fully dressed in his tuxedo, looking like a vengeful god. He wasn't looking at her with the intrigue he showed in the car. He was looking at her with panic. He was a wounded animal protecting its young. Bella scrambled to her feet, backing away, her head bowed. "Mr. Hawthorne, I apologize, I was just—" "Get in the car," he cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. He didn't look at his son. He couldn't bear to. Bella rushed out the heavy doors, her face burning with shame, tears stinging her eyes. She had crossed the line. She had touched the open wound of his family. She sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, waiting to be fired, waiting to be cast out. Minutes later, the back door opened. Miles got in. He didn't fire her. "Drive," he said. But as she pulled away, she looked in the mirror. Miles wasn't looking out the window. He was looking at his hands, trembling slightly in his lap. And then he looked up, locking eyes with her in the glass. The anger was gone. In its place was something far more terrifying. "He hasn't smiled since his mother died," Miles whispered, the confession tearing out of him against his will. "Not once. Until tonight." The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Bella realized then that she hadn't just entertained a child. She had unlocked a door that Miles had spent half a year trying to keep shut, and now that it was open, there was no going back. Hope is a cruel thing. It sneaks in through the cracks of a broken heart, promising warmth, only to freeze the moment the sun goes down. For 3 days after the incident on the stairs, the atmosphere inside the limousine changed. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was electric. It hummed with the terrifying possibility of something more. Miles no longer looked at his phone. He looked at the back of her head, at her eyes in the mirror. And Bella, foolishly, allowed herself to look back. She thought they were building a bridge. She didn't realize she was walking onto a trapdoor. The fall happened on a Friday. The evening began with a storm worse than the one that brought them together. Thunder rattled the chassis of the car as Bella waited outside the towering Hawthorne skyscraper. But when the doors opened, it wasn't just Miles who emerged. Walking beside him was a woman. She was tall, elegant, draped in silver silk that seemed immune to the rain. She was everything Bella was not, poised, wealthy, and belonging to his world. This was Elena, the daughter of a banking magnate, the kind of woman society decided Miles should be with. Bella felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. She opened the door for them, her face a mask of professional indifference. "Good evening, Bella," Miles said. His voice was tight, strained. He didn't look at her. He looked past her, at the wet pavement. "Good evening, sir." "Ma'am," Bella replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The drive was agonizing. The glass partition was up. Bella couldn't hear their words clearly, only the muffled murmur of their conversation and the occasional chime of Elena's laughter. It sounded sharp, like glass breaking. In the rearview mirror, Bella saw them. Elena had her hand on Miles's arm. Miles wasn't pulling away, but he wasn't leaning in either. He looked like a statue, cold, distant, trapped. But then he looked up. His eyes found Bella's in the mirror. For a second, the mask slipped. He looked at her with a profound, desperate apology. It was a look that said, "I am drowning, and I cannot take you down with me." But then Elena whispered something in his ear, and the moment shattered. Miles looked away, his expression hardening into steel. He reached out and pressed a button on the console. A dark, opaque privacy screen slowly rose behind the glass partition. The black curtain went up. Bella watched the view of him disappear, inch by inch. His face, his eyes, the only connection she had to him, it was all erased by a motorized wall of exclusion. She was just the driver again, just the help. When they arrived at the estate, the rain was torrential. Bella grabbed the umbrella and rushed to open the back door. Elena stepped out first, ignoring Bella completely. Miles followed. He stopped, standing there in the deluge, water dripping from the brim of Bella's cap. They were inches apart. "Mr. Hawthorne," Bella started, not knowing what she wanted to say, only knowing she had to say something. "Don't!" He cut her off. The word was a blade. He looked at her, his blue eyes devoid of the warmth she had seen just days ago. "You were right, Bella. You were paid to drive. That is all." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He shoved it into her hand. "A bonus," he said, his voice loud enough for the house staff waiting at the door to hear. "For your extra efforts with my son. But from now on, stay away from him. And stay away from me." Bella stood frozen, the envelope burning her skin like a brand. It wasn't a gift. It was a payment to make her cheap. It was his way of reducing the magic she had shown his son into a transaction. "I didn't do it for money," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I cannot afford to trust you, Bella," Miles spat out, though his eyes looked like they were screaming in pain. "The price is too high." He turned and walked up the stairs, taking Elena's arm, leaving Bella standing alone in the driveway. She looked down at the envelope in her hand. It was thick with cash. It felt like ash. She got back into the car, her sanctuary turned into a cage. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The hurt was too deep for tears. It was a dull, aching void in the center of her chest. She had saved his son's smile. She had thought she was saving him, too. But as she drove away from the mansion, watching the iron gates close in the rearview mirror, she realized the truth. You cannot save a man who has fallen in love with his own chains. And tonight, Miles Hawthorne hadn't just closed a door. He had locked it and thrown away the key. Silence is heavy, but the silence of things left unsaid is crushing. 3 days had passed since Miles had handed Bella the envelope of cash. 3 days of professional, icy politeness. The privacy screen had remained up, a black wall separating the driver from the passenger, the help from the master. Bella drove like a ghost, her eyes fixed on the road, her heart encased in armor. She had made a decision. She couldn't save a man who didn't want to be saved. On Thursday night, the routine shattered again. They had arrived at the estate gates. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world slick and glistening under the moonlight. Instead of driving through the gates, Bella put the car in park. She killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. The privacy screen was down tonight. Miles was looking at his phone, the blue light illuminating his tired face. He looked up, startled by the lack of movement. "Why have we stopped?" he asked, his voice weary. Bella took a deep breath. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the thick envelope. She turned around in her seat, bypassing the barrier of the glass, bypassing the rules of her station. "I can't accept this," she said, her voice shaking but firm. She extended the envelope toward him. Miles stared at it. He didn't take it. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. "It's a severance package," he said coldly. "Take it. Leave. Find a job where you don't have to deal with broken men." "I don't want your money, Miles," Bella said, dropping the Mr. Hawthorne for the first time. She tossed the envelope onto the leather seat beside him. "And I don't want your pity. I made your son smile because he looked lonely, just like his father. Miles flinched. The words hit him harder than a physical blow. You don't know anything about me, he snapped, his voice rising. I know enough, she countered, her eyes blazing. I know you're terrified. You pushed me away the moment you felt something real. You used that woman, Elena, as a shield. You used this money as a wall. I used them to protect you. The shout filled the small cabin, raw and desperate. Miles looked shocked by his own outburst. He slumped back against the seat, running a hand through his hair, destroying his perfect composure. Protect me, Bella whispered. Do you think my life is a fairy tale? Miles looked at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Elena isn't my girlfriend. She's the board spy. My in-laws, they are trying to take Leo. They say I'm unfit. They say I'm too unstable, too grieving to raise him. They are watching my every move, Bella. If they see me looking at you the way I do. He stopped. The confession hung in the air, vibrating. The way I do. Bella felt her heart stop, then restart with a thundering rhythm. If they see I care about you, Miles continued, his voice dropping to a broken whisper, they will use you against me. They will destroy you to get to me. And I can't lose anyone else. Everyone I love leaves, Bella. Everyone I love dies. The truth was laid bare. It wasn't arrogance that had built the wall between them. It was fear. A terrifying, paralyzing fear of loss. Bella unbuckled her seatbelt. She didn't think. She just moved. She climbed into the back seat. It was a breach of every protocol, every rule. But the rules didn't matter anymore. She sat beside him, not touching him, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. You aren't cursed, Miles, she said softly. Look at me, he whispered, refusing to meet her gaze. I'm a wreck. You're a father fighting for his son, she corrected him. And you don't have to fight alone. She reached out and, for the first time, touched him. Her hand covered his trembling fist on the seat. The contact was electric. Miles froze. He looked down at her hand, small and pale against his own, and then he looked up at her face. The ice in his blue eyes melted, replaced by a vulnerability so profound it made her chest ache. He didn't pull away. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He held on tight, like a man hanging off the edge of a cliff, finally finding a grip. I wanted to fire you, he confessed, his voice rough. Every day for the last week, I told myself to fire you, to send you away where you'd be safe. Why didn't you? Bella asked. Miles leaned in, the distance between them closing until they were sharing the same breath. Because, he breathed, the only time the noise in my head stops is when I'm looking at you. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But he rested his forehead against hers, a gesture of surrender more intimate than any kiss. In the quiet dark of the limousine, with the world locked outside, the wall had finally come down. But outside the car, the estate loomed, and the threats were still very real. They had found the truth. Now they had to survive it. The engine clicked off, a final heartbeat of the machine that had been their world for weeks. But this time, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with the terrifying, beautiful weight of a promise. Miles didn't open the door immediately. He sat there in the back seat, his hand still gripping Bella's, anchoring himself to the only reality that made sense. He looked at the massive stone facade of the Hawthorne estate, the windows glowing like judging eyes in the darkness. If we walk in there, Miles said, his voice low and steady, everything changes. The rumors will start tomorrow. The lawyers will call by noon. They will try to tear this apart. Bella squeezed his hand. She didn't look at the house. She looked at him. Let them try, she whispered. Miles exhaled, a long breath that seemed to expel years of holding back. He nodded once. He opened the door, not waiting for her to do it for him. He stepped out onto the gravel driveway, into the crisp night air that smelled of wet earth and pine. He didn't walk away. He turned, extended his hand back into the car, and waited. It was a gesture that defied centuries of tradition. The master does not help the servant. The prince does not offer a hand to the chauffeur. Bella took it. She stepped out of the car, her legs shaking slightly, but her chin held high. She took off her cap, the symbol of her uniform, her invisibility, and left it on the driver's seat. Her chestnut hair fell loose around her shoulders, reclaiming her identity. They walked up the stone steps together. They didn't touch, but the space between them was charged, a magnetic field that no one could ignore. When Miles pushed open the heavy oak doors, the foyer was silent. The staff was gone for the night. The house felt vast, cold, and echoing. "Come," Miles said softly. He didn't lead her to the study or the kitchen. He led her up the grand staircase, past the portraits of stern ancestors who seemed to frown at their intrusion. They walked down the long, shadowed hallway to the room at the very end. The nursery. The door was ajar. Inside, a single nightlight cast a warm, golden glow against the gloom. Leo was awake. He was sitting in the center of his rug, surrounded by expensive, untouched toys. He was clutching the velvet rabbit, staring at the window where the moon was breaking through the clouds. He looked so small, so isolated. Miles stopped in the doorway. The old fear gripped him, the fear of rejection, the fear that he was too broken to be the father this boy needed. Bella gently placed a hand on the small of Miles's back. It was a push, not a force, but of belief. "He's waiting for you," she whispered. "Not the billionaire. Just you." Miles took a step inside, then another. He knelt down on the rug, his tuxedo trousers straining against the floor, ruining the perfect crease. He sat across from his son. Leo looked up. His eyes darted to Bella standing in the doorway, then back to his father. Miles took a deep breath. He reached into his pocket. His hands, usually so sure when signing million-dollar contracts, were trembling. He pulled out the shiny quarter Bella had left in the car weeks ago. Miles started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. "I heard you like magic, Leo." The boy's eyes widened. Miles clumsily tried to execute the trick Bella had shown him. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't graceful. He fumbled the coin, and it didn't vanish. It just dropped onto the rug with a soft thud. Miles froze, humiliated. He closed his eyes, waiting for the indifference, waiting for the failure. But then a sound broke the silence. It was a giggle. Miles opened his eyes. Leo was smiling. Not a ghost of a smile, but a real, wide, toothy grin. The boy reached out, picked up the coin, and clumsily tried to hide it behind his own ear. "Magic," Leo whispered. The word was rusty, unused, but it was there. Miles let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He reached out and pulled his son into his arms, burying his face in the boy's small shoulder. Leo didn't pull away. He dropped the rabbit and wrapped his tiny arms around his father's neck. Bella watched from the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. She saw the ice around Miles's heart finally shatter completely. She saw the father return to the man. She turned to leave, to give them this moment, but Miles looked up. His eyes were red, raw, and absolutely luminous with gratitude. He extended an arm, opening the circle. "Bella," he said. "Stay." She hesitated, then walked into the room. She sat on the rug beside them, the three of them forming a small, imperfect island in the middle of the vast, cold ocean of the estate. Outside, the storm had passed. The clouds had cleared, revealing a sky full of stars that had been there all along, hidden behind the gray. They sat there for hours, long after Leo had fallen asleep in his father's arms. Miles looked at Bella over the sleeping form of his son. The frantic, predatory intensity of the rearview mirror was gone. In its place was a peace he hadn't known in years. "I thought I hired you to drive me away from my problems," Miles whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from Bella's face. "And now?" Bella asked softly. "Now I realize I was driving in circles," he replied. "And you were the only one who knew the way home." He leaned in, and this time there was no glass between them, no rearview mirror, no partition, no class divide. When he kissed her, it tasted like rain and redemption. It was a kiss that sealed a pact, not to be perfect, but to be present. To fight the lawyers, the board, and the world if necessary, just to keep this quiet warmth. Bella realized then that the title of her life had changed. She had walked into this house to save a child from silence. She had done that, but as Miles held her hand, his grip firm and sure, she understood the deeper truth. You don't just survive the flood by holding your breath. You survive by finding the person who teaches you how to swim. She had saved his child first, but looking into Miles's clear, loving blue eyes, she finally realized the beautiful, terrifying truth. She had saved him too, and in the reflection of his love, she had finally saved herself.